So why we keep having to go back to this same discussion? I keep seeing this every time, especially when playoffs start. We need to go back to the old system. We need to go back to 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. Not to mention we already have 1 versus 8 and 2 versus 7. We already have that. But the only difference is you don't have the 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. The other seeds are determined by the second and third place teams in your division. But we keep hearing we need to go back to the old format, 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, and all that, because you won't get the real good teams playing each other in the first round, like Dallas and Colorado, 2 of the top teams in the NHL. They're playing in the first round because you're going to get a good team that's going to lose early. You do know that we got good teams that would lose early under the old format, right? The teams I always bring up, the main one that I always bring up when hearing about, in the 1 versus 8 format, you didn't have the really good teams getting bounced in the first round. Yeah, you did. Hello, 2012 LA Kings. I'm always blown away when I hear people go and say, we don't want we don't want the top teams losing in the first round. Again, the 2012 LA Kings, hello. They ended up winning the Stanley Cup. 2 years before that, the Montreal Canadiens. They were supposed to get smoked by the President's Trophy winning Washington Capitals. What happened? The Montreal Canadiens knocked out Washington. Not only did they knock out Washington, they made it to the conference final before the clock struck 12 on their little Cinderella run. The 2006 Edmonton Oilers. Now, oddly enough, I'm wearing the 06 I'm wearing my Carolina Hurricanes jersey with the 06 finals patch because neither Carolina or Edmonton that year was expected to do what they did. Thedmonton was a number 8 seed. Carolina, I believe was a third. I think they were a 3rd seed. Back when it was 6 divisions and they were the 3rd seed, but they were the winner of what was the weakest division in the league. I believe. I'm not quite. Or no, did they have the 6 divisions at that time? I'm trying to remember now. I'm not entirely positive. I think they still had the 6 divisions. But Carolina, they were a higher seed in the East, but nobody expected anything of them. They're especially when they went into the first round, they were the higher seed, but they were considered the underdog. They were considered the underdog in that series. I don't remember a lot of people picking them to even get out of the first round that year. What happened? Oh, yeah. That's right. They won the Stanley Cup. And they beat an Edmonton Oilers team that was the number 8 seed. So this notion that we have to have the 1 versus 8 form. We have to go back to that format because we really want the good teams to win. So you don't like upsets. Okay, you don't like upsets. So you want the 1 versus 8 format because you don't like lower seeds winning. Okay. Even though low seeds won all the time. which I then go back to the old divisional format when it wasn't one. You want to talk about people that would complain. Think about the complaining that would be going on under the old format that you had from the from the 80s into the up until 1994, when you had the top 4 teams in each division made the playoffs. Imagine the complaining going on there when you would have a team that would finish 4th in the North Division. Hello, Minnesota North Stars, 1991. They would make the playoffs, while a team that would finish 5th in the Smythe Division had a better record, but they didn't make the playoffs because it was top 4 teams in each division make the playoffs. What did the Minnesota North Stars do? They won it was an 80, I believe it was an 80 game season at the time. The North Stars won 27 of 80 games. 27. Anybody out there who knows anything about do you know what happened that year? I remember it very well. The Minnesota North Stars came that close from shocking the entire hockey world. They might not have won the Stanley Cup, but they got to the Stanley Cup final. They came up short against Pittsburgh, but they knocked out the 2 best teams in the entire league in back-to-back rounds that year. The 2 best teams in the NHL that year were the 2 teams in the Norris Division that finished 1 and 2. The Chicago Blackhawks and the St. Louis Blues. They beat them both. And then they beat the reigning, defending Stanley Cup champions at that time, the Edmonton Oilers, to get to the finals, where they then ran into Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr and company. And even in that series, they were up 2-1 in that series. Things didn't bounce their way. But to continue to say that we need to have the 1 versus 8 format because we don't like upsets. This is what I keep hearing from some people. We don't want to see the really good teams lose because, it degrades the regular season. Well, here's an idea. Here's an idea. When you're a great team, and a lot of people can say this about, the Winnipeg Jets this year. The Winnipeg Jets won 55 games this year. We can also say this about the 2023 Boston Bruins. They won 65 games. What happened? They lost in the first round. Winnipeg, they're currently up in their series. But again, you want to talk about, we don't want to see the really good teams lose in the first round. Well, here's a crazy thought. Play better. Play better in the playoffs. Play like you did in the regular season. You want to have play better. Because these other teams that nobody really gives any, that nobody would give them a legitimate chance again of beating, they raise their game up. They raise their game up in the playoffs. And I'll say it, the 2023 Florida Panthers. Guess what seed they technically were? Anybody want to take a wild guess? What seed were the Florida Panthers in 2023? And people will say they were the number 2 wild card. What seed? That's the number 8 seed. They went all the way to the final. So this notion that, we have to go back to this old format because, the good teams aren't going to lose early. It doesn't matter what playoff format you play under. You're going to have a good team that's going to lose early. Even though you might be a number 2 wild card, a technically number 8 seed. These are good teams. These are all good teams. These are all good teams. This format is not going anywhere. Another reason why the format is not going anywhere is because the networks and the advertisers like this setup because they can market it easier. It's easier for them to market because the winner of the Winnipeg Jets and St. Louis Blues is going to play the winner of the Dallas Stars Colorado Avalanche series. Where under the old format, you didn't know, because if St. Louis were to win, St. Louis being the number 8 seed, they could play there's 3 other teams they could play. You won't know. You will not know until potentially the last day of the first round. If game 7, if the series were to go to 7 games, and you have the series that comes down to that, you're not going to know. You're going to have maybe a day to try to market, they're going to, the St. Louis Blues now, they'll play, let's just say for the heck of it, let's just say, LA in the second round. You won't know. You don't know until the next day. You won't know until potentially the day before. So you'll only have really one day to market this series. You don't have to worry about that under the current format. The winner of Winnipeg St. Louis is going to play the winner of Dallas, Colorado. The winner of Vegas, Minnesota is going to play the winner of Edmonton, LA, etc. You know what you're getting in the second round. You're going to get this particular team playing against this particular team, whichever team wins those particular series. Under the old format, you didn't know. You didn't know who you were playing. You had no clue. And even if you were a high seed, you didn't know who you were playing. If you're waiting for the winner of the 1 versus 8 matchup, you don't know who the heck you're playing. You don't know who you're playing until potentially the last game of the year or the last day of that series. So it's so odd that people still complain about wanting the old format back. You're not going to get the old format back. The way you get the old format back, and I say when this happens, not if this happens, when it happens, when the NHL expands again to go to 34 teams or even potentially 36 teams, then I think you're going to get a different playoff format, because then I think you're going to get a play-in style. You might get a similar play-in style tournament to what the NBA has. Now, granted, the NBA is interesting how I personally would do it a little different than I think they do. I mean, I don't really get much into the NBA, so I don't really follow how their play-in format works. But I believe the way they do it is they have number 7 versus number 8, number 9 versus number 10, and then I think the winner of those matchups then get the 7 and 8, the 7 seed and the 8 seed. I think. I'm not positive on that. I would do it a little differently. I would end up doing it a little differently because I would see it like you would do in the 1 versus 8 format. You know, you have 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. So if you have it for 10 teams, the top 6 teams guarantee the playoff spot, and then the 7, 8, 9, and 10 seeds play each other for those last 2 spots. 7 versus 10, 8 versus 9. The winners of those matchups go to the playoffs. It shouldn't be that hard of a thing to figure out. That's how you get the 1 versus 8 back. But you know, I hate that I have to keep going on little rants like this because it makes no sense. But we're not getting the 1 versus 8 format back unless a play-in style tournament becomes a thing. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. This is always kind of a passionate little debate. But again, let me know what you guys think in the comments. And you know, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. That would be awesome. I would love you forever if you hit that subscribe button. Share the video with everyone that you know. Hit that little notification bell to be notified anytime future videos are uploaded. And yeah, so the playoff debate. It seems like an every year thing that we always have to kind of talk about something like this. But again, let me know your opinions in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, share. I will see you guys later.